one of the elements which everyone is trying to address is waste. But when you're still, approaching it from the perspective of, okay, how do we make this commercially viable? Well, the truth is, some of these things, if you're going to approach it the linear way, in terms of let's make this as efficient as possible, it's now a separate process, and therefore it needs to be able to stand on its own.
Yes.
When in fact, probably can't, because it's the result of a previous process, which was the production or the consumption.
Expect performers. This is an incredibly special episode. The very first episode that the Expect Performance podcast has left the cozy, comfortable confines of the gym and has expanded its borders and horizons, this time as far and as wide as the Greater Kruger National Park in the heart of the Bursary Private Nature Reserve. And over the course of the next 50 minutes, you'll be introduced to 3 different guests from a variety of backgrounds, but united behind a common purpose and a common cause. And it really revolves around a simple question: what are you leaving behind? And how do you intend to pay it forward? Enter Josh Webb, an entrepreneur from a stellar career so far. As a commercial director at 29 years old of a FMCG trading company, Josh pivoted into numerous roles, least of which is a new company called Carbon Conscious, which tackles hard truths about consumerism, breaking the cycle of wasteful habits, and how to create sustainable, actionable change through adventures in the bush in collaboration with Blackfoot Safaris, who you might remember is a previous guest on the show. Stay tuned throughout the episode for the 2 remaining guests after Josh, Wasani and Ngwenya, who is an incredible videographer with an incredible story to tell, as well as Craig Howson, a 4th generation landowner of the Bursary. Please like, share, subscribe, and enjoy. Josh Webb, it was inevitable you were going to end up on this podcast at some stage. So welcome to episode 53. We're out here in Northampton Lodge in the Bursary. It's a wonderful day. It's a hot day, but what a magical afternoon, and it's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sham. I wish I could have been on a more, meaningful number, but I guess I'm going to take player 53.
There you go. Nothing wrong with being player 53. We are here because of a concept and a business and a, if you want to call it, a value system that has been formalized in the form of Carbon Conscious. So let's start with that. What is Carbon Conscious, and what do you aim to do with it?
Yeah, that's thanks for the introduction, Sham, and forgive me, I'm going to really struggle to call you Clinton because we've been friends for so long.
That's all right.
But effectively, Carbon Conscious is really a movement. It was started by myself and Julian from Blackfoot Safaris, who has been on this podcast before.
Absolutely.
And really, it's about bringing awareness to, one, just how consumers, partake in, forgive me for a lack of creativity, but consumerism.
Yeah.
The lack of awareness around the subject of consumerism, and also the misinformation that kind of gets, put forward into the marketplace as either the truth or acceptable. And really, it was just about bringing light to some of these subjects in a setting like we find ourselves in today, which, for all intents and purposes, is a vulnerable biome. And no matter how you slice and dice it, these places are becoming harder and harder to find as, we progress through the Anthropocene. It's a nice place to start. Yeah.
So, for clarity purposes, what does it mean to consume? Let's start with that. So what is consumption? How can people apply that to their daily lives, that definition?
So consumption is such a broad, word and subject, but effectively the best way I like to kind of simplify it is to take really the basics in terms of we make something, we eat it, and we dispose of it afterwards.
Yeah.
That's kind of the neatest summary of consumerism.
Okay.
And where we see consumerism now today, it's become all about efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore the process, when we speak about, changing the style, when you hear words like circularity, sustainability, all lovely words, but when you get down to, the cold hard facts, the system has become even more linear in terms of we want that thing to be as efficient as possible. We want it to be clean, precise, produced, eaten or consumed, and disposed of as efficiently as possible.
Okay. So is it the disposal of that lineage that is the issue here? Is it the disposal that is the problem? So where does that waste go, that byproduct go? Is that one of the things that Carbon Conscious is aiming to create awareness around?
Yes. Yeah, okay. So it's one of the issues, and of course you hear it more and more in the world today. Obviously a lot of people are trying to make things more sustainable, more circular. That's great. And one of the elements which everyone is trying to address is waste. But when you're still, approaching it from the perspective of, okay, how do we make this commercially viable? Well, the truth is some of these things, if you're going to approach it the linear way in terms of let's make this as efficient as possible, it's now a separate process and therefore it needs to be able to stand on its own.
Yes.
When in fact, probably can't, because it's the result of a previous process, which was the production or the consumption. So waste is one thing that needs to be addressed, sure, but let's just look at the entire system or the entire way in which we've been coaxed really into consuming various products, not only in terms of us as consumers, but even as industry. It's actually important to take the whole process from start to finish.
Okay, so let's take waste as an example. It can be in the form of any type of waste.
Definitely.
Plastic pollution, carbon emissions, etc., etc., etc.
Sure.
So something that I wrestle with personally, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this as somebody who's given this a lot of thought clearly, is how do you construct your day-to-day decisions without feeling as though you are contradicting yourself?
That is such a good question, Sham. And to be honest, I think it's very hard because I don't think... I think there is a level of subjectivity, and as always, I think there's a level of context to each situation that, either warrants you to take, let's say, a particular position and later on change that position because, well, it's important. The context has changed.
Yeah.
So one, I don't think should ever be afraid to contradict themselves. I just think it's important to reason and try and understand why perhaps there is a contradiction in even your own feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with that 100%. It is impossible, I believe, to live a life that's free of contradiction.
Absolutely.
Things change all the time. Values change. Context changes. Circumstances change.
Yeah.
But I think on the whole, if there's a net movement in a positive direction, then that's something that an individual should look to strive towards.
Correct.
What are, on a day-to-day basis, things that people can do tomorrow to reduce that waste at the end of that consumerism lineage?
Yeah, so for me, I always like to go back to reduce, reuse, recycle, right? And we've turned this into all types of catchy songs, even Jack Johnson has a little catchy jingle on it. And
Does he really?
he does.
What's
he
it
does. It's called Reduce, Reuse, Recycle.
Oh, really?
You've never heard it?
No.
You've got to download it afterwards.
Can you give me a line?
You got to reduce, reuse, recycle.
I'll leave it to it.
It's actually from Curious George.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the book which then got made into a movie. Anyway, we're getting really distracted, but if you just start there, it's quite interesting because all the fundamentals are right there. It starts with reduce. You know, when you look at your life, certainly I did this, throughout 2024. I've had an unusual year, that's for sure. But I found myself at home, which is unusual because I've spent the last decade traveling, fairly often, and now to be stuck at home, I really got to analyze my life quite closely, and I really started to just look at basic stuff. I'm a milk fan, I'm a chocolate fan, love them together.
It's a good combo.
It's a dangerous combo. and I just started to look at kind of all the Tetra Paks, building up in my waist, and I was like, I'm a waster.
Yeah, you're a consumer.
Oh, I'm a consumer.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, not that there was much that I could do about it in this particular case, but just to be aware of kind of that, again, going back to that linear process, sheepers, every time I finish one of these, it's got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And so when you see, for example, convenience packs, if you're a heavy consumer of that particular product, instead of, let's say having one packaging of a Kit Kat, the big slab of the fingers.
Yeah.
And you're now reducing it down to minis because you want one for either your own lunchbox or your kid's lunchbox or whatever. Well, you've created potentially 20 times more waste instead of just buying the bulk pack and putting it in the same lunch container, right?
Yeah.
What
about, for example, like buying glass still water bottles versus plastic still water bottles? Does that make a difference, buying glass compared to plastic?
So again, another good question, and the original question was around, reduce, reuse, recycle. So first, in terms of reduce, whether you buy plastic or glass, same waste, right? But what's interesting here is you can actually change the subject. If you want to now speak about carbon emissions, which is really what we want to bring awareness to, well, in South Africa specifically, glass is pretty much not recycled in this country. And that's a fact. Anyone who tells you otherwise or wishes to argue with me on this podcast, I really welcome them to show me evidence that suggests otherwise.
I'll attach your email in the show notes.
But the truth is, there is only one place where you can pretty much recycle glass in South Africa, and that's at Consol in Johannesburg. And you have to get the material back to them, for which they will pay you. But of course, this is a total loss process. There's no commercial value in doing that. So you're only doing it either to close the loop, which is a great thing. I think this should be standard, or you're doing it to feel good. But the bottom line is PET, which is what all your plastic bottles for water or for Coca-Cola, etc., they're all made from PET. PET has got a far bigger recycle rate in this particular country.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So therefore, and not that I'm suggesting one or the other is better, but certainly the recycling process or closing that loop, South Africa is much closer to closing its loop on PET than it is on glass.
On glass.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't realize that. That's very interesting.
Yes. And it's these types of things that we just want to kind of educate, educate the consumer. Obviously, like I said, I've spent a lot of time traveling. I've spent a lot of time in France, as an example, understanding their culture, how they think, bringing some of that knowledge. Really what we want to do as Carbon Conscious is connect. We want to keep that connection between the global north and the global south alive, because whilst, political shifts at the moment are suggesting a much more closed market, in reality, this is going to be very hard to achieve simply because we've become so connected. So politically, we can say one thing, but on the ground every day, business is going to continue
Yeah.
because it has to. We've made it that way. And the economics suggest that it's going to be very hard to change if you want to keep inflation under control, and these types of subjects. So long as that is alive, I think it's more important that, these two hemispheres kind of know what's important to each one and how they're solving problems differently. Because in our case, we can use a lot of tech that they have developed. But in other cases, I think there's lots of things that we do much, much better here, as an example. And that's because we've had to learn certain things. So this idea of sharing information, for me, I think it's very important.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Moving back to carbon conscious.
Yes.
You've used in this case, the Bursary as
Yes.
a vehicle to promote these values and to educate your customers on these values and the importance of it. Why did you decide to make that connection together of bringing people into the African bushveld to then educate them on these much broader topics?
Nice question, Sham. So I guess I did it because I'll tell you, there's a very clear story last year, summer in France, more or less July. And I was at a lunch table with a bunch of friends, and there was a big subject about where everyone was going to spend their December holiday. And one of the women at the table said, they weren't going to go overseas. And the reason for that is because they were very conscious of the carbon emissions involved in a flight. Because effectively, your three major industries that contribute to carbon is energy, firstly, where you get your power. Second is transport. And third is your food supply chain. So, of course, you think as a consumer, because industry has done very well to make it the consumer's problem, even though on the global scale, their carbon emissions are tiny. But therefore, Europeans have become very conscious about, okay, flip, that's a good point. Maybe I don't have to take that aeroplane. And so she said she's not going to leave Europe going forward because she wants to keep her carbon footprint low. And I appreciated this. Seemed like a very conscious act. But, of course, because I'm South African, I understand a little bit about how these places work. The Bursary, or let's say the greater Kruger, vulnerable biomes. Whether you're coming to Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, doesn't matter. They are the same. They are vulnerable biomes, but they are natural and they need to be protected. And you as a South African will know this. Who is this industry targeted?
Yeah.
They've targeted the Europeans. They've targeted the global north.
Yes.
The guys with a much more powerful currency, a bit more spending power, and for them to come on safari, it's not to go to the bush like we call it. To go on safari, this is a big deal, and it's a dream for them, right? But I just suggested, well, what if you stop coming? What if all of you, let's say your movement is so strong, what if none of you come? What happens to this place? This whole greater Kruger area would need to pivot like it did in COVID.
In COVID, yeah.
And we all know that movie. And how quickly did Oaks drop their price, change this, do that, go back to the local market, oh, please, and look how quickly we've returned back to the model of super luxury, keeping it exclusive, na. And so I chose this vehicle because, one, what a privilege to be out here. I am very grateful to have made the contacts that I have through various friends and family, to be able to spend time here. But therefore, what better way than to use those contacts and to say, hey guys, let's go on a different experience. Let's source all our food locally and let's invite some interesting people to the campfire to talk about their particular projects and what they're doing and how it works.
Like Ben. Ben was super interesting last night.
Ben Coley, from Calypso, fantastic initiative, going on a sky safari. It
was mind-blowing. We saw Jupiter, we saw Saturn. It's just crazy.
And then when he starts talking about the distances between all of these places,
You want to be humbled.
there we go.
Go on a sky safari.
Exactly. And so I chose this place. Well, not this necessarily this particular place. We'll get there later. But I chose the bush because I understand the bush. Being African, most Africans understand the bush to some degree. They understand true nature, versus a guy who grew up in London who now works for, I don't know, some bank. For him to comprehend that, the population of elephants is, reaching a critical point. Well, okay.
It's not going to make any difference to their lives.
Exactly. And yet, at some point, it does. So I chose that because, it's something I understand. It's something that I deeply resonate with. And I really feel like it's a connector. And working with Blackfoot Safaris, obviously Julian Geertz being a really good friend of mine, I just love the way he operates. I mean, he's Italian born, grew up in Africa himself. I mean, your listeners have heard his story. And he's just so passionate. And now you've had a chance to experience, just the way he operates his particular tour business. It's totally different. Hence why we're now sitting at a camp called Northampton. I mean...
Which is impossible to find.
And isn't that the beauty, right? You're now sitting in a place which quite a few people might even know, the Clisseri, right?
Yeah.
It's fairly popular, both locally and internationally. But you're now sitting in a place which Blackfoot Safaris has found. Why? Because him and Craig resonate on the same level of what they want to achieve, of keeping things humble, of keeping things truly about nature. I mean, our first game drive with Craig yesterday, it was all about respecting that rhino.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've been on a few safaris.
Yeah. No, that's not always the case.
That's not
that
your
same level of respect. Yeah.
That's not your standard approach. And for me, that's why I trust Julian so much. It's why when he says, "Hey, Josh, you got to come check out this place," I really want to get involved, because what we aim to do, we don't want to be big. Not at all. We just want to make a very direct influence to the people close to us.
Yeah. I love the analogy of, I did a podcast my episode 52 was on the 7 pillars of essential living. One of those things was philanthropy. Yes. And I love the analogy of a pendulum. You must take first, like has always been the case, going back to residents and inhabitants of the bush.
Sure.
You've got to take from nature first, respectfully, but then that pendulum's going to swing back, and then you've got to pay it forward and you've got to pay it back.
Definitely.
And I think that is something that is encapsulated the last 2 days here, is that there's a connection to the immediate surroundings in terms of prioritizing that first over the, you might say, consumption of the individuals that inhabit it for that prescribed amount of time.
Absolutely.
So you partner with Blackfoot Safaris.
Yep.
Carbon Conscious is created.
Yep.
You create a product or a form of getaway.
Yes.
In the greater Kruger National area with
sure.
people that share the same values.
For sure.
And then you customize getaway packages accordingly, bringing in special guests, customizing the package to enable people to learn more about consumption and the environment and the effect that it has on the African bush. Would you say, in a small context, that is what Carbon Conscious is about?
Absolutely. And then ultimately to pay that back.
Yeah.
So, we're obviously going to do a bit of tree planting later. We want to, in the future, incorporate other NPCs who we've gotten to know. You're going to hear from Wasani a bit later. This has all happened because of the birth of Carbon Conscious. And if you can make such a small direct impact so quickly, then I think you're onto something.
Yeah. Josh, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved chatting to you today, and I continue to love this experience that we've got. Mozambique spitting cobras and all. But it's been a truly incredible experience and very enlightening from my side as well. So thank you. Really appreciate this new concept that you bring into the world, and I wish you all the best on the ventures going forward.
Thank you so much, Shum, and thanks for making the effort to come up here. this is your first. This is your first
remote recording.
Remote recording.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, well, then, I'm privileged to be number 53.
There you go. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Sean.
Hey everyone, hope you are enjoying the show so far. Up next, I've got Craig Howson. Craig is the co-founder of a company called Wild Legacy Safaris, and together with Craig and his wife, they form a formidable partnership, creating a unique and sustainable bush experience. I can personally attest to that, having been fortunate enough to be a guest on Craig's safaris over the last 2 days, including walks in the Clisseri in the African bush itself. Interestingly enough, Craig is the 4th generation of Clisseri land owners. That's right, his family first arrived in the Clisseri in 1924. This context gives Craig a remarkable drive and sense of legacy and responsibility to preserving and conserving this beautiful, beautiful landscape, both for his family but also for future generations. Please enjoy our discussion with Craig Howson. Craig, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure so far. I've just been chatting to Josh, and this is such a beautiful place, the Clisseri. It is truly, truly wild. And I mean, just last night there were not one, not two, but 3 Mfezis.
Yeah.
Mozambique spitting cobras. You
Yeah.
told me 2,
Yeah.
but there were 3.
I believe there
Yeah.
was a third. Yeah.
You tried to tone it down a little.
Indeed.
When I was like 3.
Yeah, they're out and about.
They're
It's
out
a
and
change in
about.
the season.
This place
great.
is wild, man. And
Yeah.
it's such a privilege to be here. And you and your family have such deep roots in this area. Can you give me some context for why you find yourself here and the historical lineage that has come before you?
Sure. Blessed and privileged enough to have very deep roots, like you said, in the Clisseri. Rewinding the clock, my great-grandfather and his brother, closer to the 1900s, got word that this area was good lands historically for hunting purposes back in the day. So they made the long journey from KwaZulu-Natal, the cane lands of Scottburgh, Park Rainey area.
Not far from me.
Good stuff, good stuff. So they started the 2 to 3 day journey up to the Lowveld. And upon arrival, they were shown around by a gentleman called Pump Willis, who was a surveyor / he owned a trading store, a bit of man, the jock of all trades, you know. And he showed them around the area, and effectively the 2 brothers were very keen on the land. So they bought 40,000 hectares of the existing Clisseri today of 60,000 hectares.
Sure.
They then proceeded, obviously, so in 1948, my great-grandfather died, and him and his brother effectively had 2 big, massive portions of the Clisseri, 4 farms each. And 1948, he died, and he left 1 block to my grandfather, 1 block to my grandfather's brother, 1 block to his nephew, this property, Northampton, and 1 block to his cousin. And yes, so lucky enough, my grandfather sadly then passed away in 2003 and left the property to the future generation. So yes, I'm very proud to be 4th generation Clisseri. So
Wow.
we still have a couple of family members in the camp, surrounded, scattered in the reserve. So yeah, I could safely say I know a lot of the Clisseri. I have been extensively north, south, east, and west. So
Yeah.
very nice. Yeah, that's the gist of it.
What does that legacy mean to you going forward? Is something like this that we have here in our surroundings, is something like this important to you to maintain and to pass on to future generations, 5th, 6th, 7th generations?
Great question. Well, absolutely. So my wife and I, Jocelyn, which you've met in the camp, we decided, obviously we've been in the bush quite a long time, and after COVID, a few years went by and we settled in the area. Obviously our roots came from KZN, and we spent all our family holidays and time in the bush for many, many years. But my wife and I decided that we would start a company called Wild Legacy Safaris, hence the heritage.
Yes.
So yeah, we've started our Wild Legacy Safaris, and in connection with Carbon Conscious and Blackfoot Safaris, I was approached, and yes, it's fantastic to meet these kinds of fantastic people that are conscious of the environment and have the same direction or future thoughts that I do.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about conserving this area, Kleseri. We are proud to be wild and free, so I believe that it's up to us to obviously conserve what we have left behind. There's not many very wild, very places left in the world, as you know. And I take a responsibility. I believe that I have a passion for this. I believe the animals are the priority. My logo is the rhino, based on a beautiful photograph I took of a black rhino. I'll show it to you. Yes, based on that, and stemming back to, obviously you're aware of all the poaching problems we have, especially with our rhino and ivory historically, and not only the big issues that everyone knows about, you know, the pangolin problems.
I had a lady, Nikki Wright. Do you know Nikki Wright?
I've heard of her.
Yeah, so she does all the pangolin conservation and rehabilitation. I had her on the show to talk about trafficking of pangolins. Unbelievable. They're being decimated.
Yeah, shame. So I believe it's up to us and people, like-minded people, like Julian, like Josh, like those people in the world, to pave the way for the future generations. You know, we are the ones responsible to hand a legacy on to the next generation.
Yeah,
I'm proud to be a part of that.
Yeah, and as you should be. And something that struck me about your connection with the bush and how you govern yourself on a view when we're out there and we're doing a game drive. We've been privileged enough already in one day to see 4 of the big 5, but heading out there, one of the first things that we saw was a white rhino, and the way that you conducted yourself, keeping the best interest of the rhino and at the front, at the foreground. And we parked far away. We got out the vehicle and we watched and we observed this rhino from a distance with her young. And I can say that that's not exactly something that other game rangers have done in the past. Some 1 or 2, but by and large, you bash your way through the bundus, you get as close to the animal as you possibly can, and whilst it's nice in the sense that it makes for a great picture, it's not exactly keeping the best interests of the animal at heart. And that's come through so far in my time since I've been here, and you to be commended on that.
Thank you.
It's one thing to pay lip service to it, but it's another thing to, when you're out there, put the best interests of the animal at heart. And it's a testament to you and what you've done. You've spent a lot of time here. I'm sure you've got lots of childhood memories, and this must feel like it really is a part of you. Yeah. Do you have any stories in your childhood, in growing up, from this Kleseri area that stand out to you that you'd like to share with me?
So yeah, I got the hiding of my life when I was a small young boy. Speaking of pangolins, of the hiding of my life, my brother and I decided to take the old Land Rover 1 series when we were young, probably about 9 or 10 years old.
Wow.
So maybe that's where the problem started, taking the Landy and just driving out of camp. We couldn't reach.
You could drive at 9?
Well, we
10 years
couldn't
old?
quite reach the pedals, so we used to tie blocks of wood onto the bottom of our feet so we could reach the pedals. But let's be honest, those old Land Rover ones, the minute you took your foot off the clutch, they were just going.
They were going.
And they weren't stopping, so you could quietly just pootle along by and take yourself on a game drive. So we did. We took ourselves on a game drive, and my mom and my late father were in camp, and we came across a pangolin in the bush, our very first pangolin, and we thought, okay, our parents are never going to believe us, right? So we did, yes, the unethical thing, and when we look back now, 40 years later, it wasn't the right thing to do, but we live and we learn. We scooped up the pangolin, you know how it goes into protective soccer ball, well, shape of a ball, and we were very gentle. We got a nice jacket and put it on the seat, and we carried, careful consideration. We took it back to camp, all very excited to show our parents and their friends, who were excited, extremely excited to see the pangolin. They won't admit it, but they were extremely excited to see the pangolin, and we had a lovely, good old viewing of it. Everyone enjoyed it, and then it was time to take the pangolin back to the exact same spot in the bush. So off we went, this time under adult supervision, sadly, and we put the pangolin exactly where we had found it. But then it was time to, obviously, the discipline back in the day was the good old 6 of the best, but out for the first time came the hippo-hide sjambok.
The hippo-hide sjambok.
Hippo-hide
Good
sjambok,
heavens.
and let me tell you, it wraps completely all the way around. So to this day, I'm 40 now, to this day, I have never picked up a pangolin. So it worked, but from picking up pangolins and getting hidings to being stuck in rivers to driving off high lift jacks to get out of the river, one looking for crocodiles, one driving off the jack, parents not knowing, sleeping in the hides, sleeping in the hides. A hide above the river, just basically a tree house, sleeping in the tree house, baited little meat below, all those things that irresponsible parenting, but we won't go down that road. All those things. So we lived a good childhood here. We did all the things we shouldn't. I've definitely flooded 1 or 2 Land Rover engines in my time from being stuck in the river, but they still go to this day. So, yeah. But yes, we had an absolute dream of a young childhood growing up in the Clisseri. And it was through all those experiences I got it out of my sister. We've moved buffalo carcasses when the lions weren't eating. We've moved buffalo carcasses from the vehicle, put the tow rope around and drag it a few meters to get a better viewing when the lions come out. We've done all the unethical things as young children, or experimenting here and there, to realize, obviously, going into our adulthood, about pure conservation. And why I'm so obviously involved in conservation is my grandfather's generation. We spoke about my early roots in the Clisseri. It was my grandfather's generation that all banded together and decided that we all have farms around each other. Let's drop our fences and let's be incorporated, and drop the fences with the Kruger National Park, and let's incorporate this into a private nature reserve. So Clisseri was one of the very first private nature reserves. Going back to my grandfather's generation of pure conservationists, that's where I'd like my future to be.
Wonderful.
Conserving what our forefathers have left us behind.
And hopefully, to the best of your ability, leaving it in a better place than where you found it.
Completely. And with like-minded people, like I'm meeting Josh, Blackfoot Safaris, Carbon Conscious, we're heading in the right direction for sure.
Yeah. So we're here at the wonderful Northampton Lodge. What do you hope for people to experience when they come here, when they go home and they get home and they tell their friends and their family? What is the one thing that you hope that they take away with them when they leave here?
Probably a passion for a bit of wildlife, passion for conservation, a raw, hearty experience. I am not afraid of making a guest crawl in the mud, crawl in the sand, after that rhino on foot, just to make sure, everything is safe, etc. So it's all about getting down and dirty, hearty experience, The camp, we're blessed enough to obviously be in this camp. It's a hearty, rustic old camp. It's the very first camp built in the Bursary in the 1930s. Yes, it's been upgraded to a few luxuries of today, overhead fans and that kind of thing to try to keep cool, fans and that. And but yeah, other than that, very first camp in the Bursary, I hope people will come in, have a true gritty heart-to-heart experience, hearty meals, basic, beautiful, comfortable sleeping arrangement, lovely, hearty experience. Sit around the fire, have a nice chat, and pure memories, create memories.
I think for me personally, being here and when I leave tomorrow, it's a case of being connected with wildlife and being connected with nature in a much more holistic sense. Not so much going into the game reserve with a mindset of, okay, I'm ticking off this list,
Correct.
going to see the big five, and basing the success of my trip on how many of the big five I've seen. And I think that you've done a tremendous job so far with Carbon Conscious and Blackfoot Safaris of bringing that all together and drawing the awareness around. It's not just about that. It's about the bigger picture. It's about appreciating being in nature. It's about, as Ben alluded to yesterday, having no light pollution. It's about being able to appreciate being in the bush and not seeing another light for as far as you can see, to listen to the sounds, the smells from the different bushes, as we were heading back to camp earlier this morning. So I think for me personally, that is something that I'm definitely taking away from this. And I'd like to thank you for your time and coming on the show. And it's been an absolute privilege to have you. And I wish you all the success to you and your family in the future.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for your kind words. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Hey everyone, finally on the show today is a gentleman by the name of Wasani Ngwenya. And Wasani is the official videographer for the weekend to the Bursary. And what a remarkable young man. The owner of WeNext Productions and a product of a wonderful initiative called Wild Shots Outreach, which uses photography to engage youngsters from previously disadvantaged communities to teach them employment skills in tourism and conservation. And boy oh boy, has this guy made the most of that opportunity. What a talent, what a remarkable story, what an uplifting story, and I'm so glad that I got the opportunity to chat to him and for him to share his story on this platform. I know you will too. Please enjoy the final discussion today with Wasani Ngwenya. Wasani, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Wasani, you've got a very interesting story. So what I've loved about this weekend is the variety of people, personalities, characters that have congregated here at Northampton to showcase this amazing place and this amazing concept.
Yeah.
And you are responsible for delivering that product.
Yeah.
You're the videographer. You're the guy that's responsible for capturing those moments.
Yeah.
But the story behind how you learned your trade is what I'm interested in. I think it's a wonderful story. So can you share with me your background and how you got to be the skilled person in videography that you are today?
Yeah, no, thank you very much for this opportunity. Well, being here, it's quite a major role to play. And considering that I need to put a great product out of it. But my journey, it's of inspiration, determination, and consistency.
Yeah.
And there's been few ups and downs on my journey. I started when I was in grade 10. When I started, I was passionate about writing and in journalism. And that's when Mr. Mike Kendrick, the founder of Wild Shots Outreach, came to our high school to run the second program of Wild Shots Outreach of which the first program my friend Rufumo Matebula attended, and he invited me to the second program, say like, hey man, you're very passionate about writing. How about we try photography and see if you're gonna like it or not? I jumped on the project, and I participated in the program, which was very amazing. And I had my very first game drive in grade 10.
Wow.
So imagine you grow up next to this nature, this rich wildlife, but you've never been to a game drive. You only see these animals on books, on TV, but you've never experienced any of those. And I had my very first game drive. That was when I was in grade 10. Which was very beautiful. I even still have the first picture that I took on the game drive, which
Really?
which is an elephant. I still have it with me, and it was really amazing. And to my surprise, even my principal, the school principal, he's never been to a game drive, and I think at his late 40s, 50s, he had his first game drive with us,
Wow.
which was a very amazing experience. And since then, that's where the passion for videography and photography came. And now standing here with WeNext Production, with a qualification as a filmmaker, done a few jobs in corporate, and so.
Where did you grow up? You mentioned that you had your first experience on a game drive in grade 10 when you were at high school. Where did you grow up and where did you go to school?
I grew up at Lidlo Village, which is, I think it's an hour and 30 from Kruger National Park when you use the Manyeleti Road.
Okay.
So it's not that far from Kruger National Park, but you never had an opportunity to be there. So that's where I grew up and bred there. Yeah. So
it's so important, especially in a country like South Africa that is incredibly unequal in its distribution of wealth, that people are able to be provided with opportunities like the opportunity that you've received to showcase and to develop your skills. And you were showing me some of the projects that you've worked on, music videos, clips from films, etc., etc. That wonderful piece of documentary videography that was done, was that in an orphanage?
Yeah, it was in an orphanage at Skagule.
Yes. I mean, remarkable pieces of filming and videography. So you're truly, really are a talented and skilled person.
Yeah.
Tell me about your studies after high school. Okay, so you finish, you complete matric.
Yeah.
Okay, and then now you have to go and you have to continue your studies to develop the skill set that you have now. So what happened after matric?
So, surprisingly, what happened is, even though I was passionate about photography, passionate about writing, after I did my matric, I got good grades, but I applied to study law.
Okay.
I didn't apply to do any
so
of
you went
those.
something completely opposite. So from a creative, abstract, you then went the complete opposite.
I applied to study law, and I was accepted at UJ. I remember I was in the queue. We're doing registrations. So it was taking forever for us to finish the registrations. While I was still in the queue, I sat back. I was like, you know what? I'm not so passionate about law. I'm doing this because I've seen one of the guys from my community being a lawyer, and he was well spoken, was a smart guy, wears suits, he looked nice. So I wanted to be him. And I was like, this is not what I'm passionate about. What am I doing here? And I had to tell my mom and tell her that I'm not accepted at UJ. I went back home, took a gap year, and while I was sitting at home, my mom asked me, I was like, I thought you were accepted at college, at university. And to my surprise, he just called me 2 weeks ago to tell me that you're not accepted at university. I was like, yeah, I'm not accepted. And later on, only I told her that I was accepted, but I was not passionate about studying law. So
when it was safe.
yeah. And then during that gap year, that's when I did my first internship with film guys here in Woodspray, Painted Dogs. And then from there, I grew more, my passion grew stronger and stronger. And then that's where, through crowdfunding and the help of Watch Outs Outreach, we managed to put together funds. And then I became the first student of Watch Outs Outreach to go to university and study filmmaking.
Wow.
And that was 3 years of me being there. And after that, there's a number of students now that are being funded because of that hard work, because of that success of my story, and more young people are getting bursary every year. So it's been a journey, yeah.
So you were the first person
Yeah.
to come through that program,
Yeah.
and they crowdfunded it.
Yeah.
How did they go about crowdfunding it? Do you know?
So I don't know the details, but
Mm.
I know that some of the funding came from the conference in Cape Town,
Yeah.
and other people are supporting the program, Wild Shots Outreach. So
What's the name of the program?
Wild Shots Outreach.
Wild Shots
Yeah.
Outreach.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
a non-profit organization.
Yeah.
It's here in Hoedspruit. It goes around local communities and teach young people about photography and conservation, founded by Mike Kendrick.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is fantastic.
That
That really is a wonderful story. And you've
Yeah.
certainly taken that opportunity and you've made the most of it.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing getting an opportunity, it's up to the individual to decide whether or not they want to take that opportunity to the fullest capacity.
Yeah, I mean, till today, I sit down and look at the hard work that I've put in during my college time, because for me, I was not only studying for myself, I was studying to make a success of this crowdfunding so that more young people from my community can benefit from it. And seeing that happening, it's a story that I carry with me every day.
Mm.
And it was quite a difficult environment to be in. I mean, coming from a village to being in a space where you competing with people from a better education system than you, better background than you, and then my English was not good at all, so I was just finding my way around.
Yeah.
And and most of the students that I was studying with, they already had a background as filmmakers, already have a background of what they were doing. They actually knew what they were doing. With me, I was discovering everything for the first time, and being able to discover everything for the first time and being able to do it good and right and get good grades out of that, for me, it was the best experience ever. So it was more than doing it for myself and my family, but doing it for my community as well, and so that more young people can benefit from it.
I love that.
Yeah.
I wonder how many of your colleagues and peers and students that you studied with, that you were behind, as you called it,
Yeah.
have been on a podcast now.
I
So,
wonder as well.
eh?
I wonder as well.
Yeah, I don't think many, man.
Yeah, I don't
think
think so.
many.
I don't think so.
So perseverance, dedication to your craft,
yeah.
Working towards a purpose that's greater than yourself
Yeah.
has obviously served as a very powerful driving force and motivator for you. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair to say. I mean, that's what WeNext production is about. Yeah, I've called it WeNext production because when I sit down and look at people and my peers and the creative people that I work with, I looked at us as the next generation that is gonna produce films and documentaries that are more meaningful to people, that are for people and about people. And yeah, that's how I look at it.
How does your family feel about this?
Well, they don't really understand what I'm doing, but they're very much supportive, to my surprise. My mom, she just know that I work with a camera, but
Yeah.
but what is it exactly that I do, she still don't know much about it. But they are very supportive. Whenever I tell them that I'm going somewhere, they'll support me in any way possible.
Really?
Yeah.
So from being that student that was standing in the line at UJ,
Yeah.
signing up to be a lawyer,
Yeah.
bailed out, crowdfunded,
Yeah.
made the most of your opportunity, driven by a sense of paying it forward and being an example and a pioneer
Yeah.
and paving the way for future kids to come through,
Yeah.
is an incredibly powerful force. And then for it to come full circle, to be in this successful career and having come full 360 from that person who was standing in the line to study law,
To study
and
law,
then
yeah.
having the full backing and acceptance
Yeah.
and support of your family as
Yeah.
well, because that's an important thing. You know, you
True,
can
true.
many people fell into and have fallen and will continue to fall into the same trap that you fell into,
Yeah.
with pursuing something that was not authentic to yourself,
Yeah.
and being driven by something that was material, that was an ideology, but many people don't have the self-awareness at that age to back out. And you, in that first year out of school, had the presence of mind and the self-awareness to realize and to have the courage to say that this is not for me. I'm not about being a lawyer. I'm pursuing something more meaningful. And in some ways that, in fact, in many ways, that is the most important element of the story. Not necessarily that you're a person that's very skilled at what you do, but you decided to pursue something that was meaningful and to provide meaning and pave the way for others. Let that pendulum swing back. Came to you. You had the opportunity. You got the crowdfunding. You made the most of it. But then immediately, as you had the skills to be able to make money from what you were doing, that pendulum was moving back. It was a driving force to pave the way for future people to come in. So you are a tremendous inspiration, and I'm so glad that I got to hear about your story.
And thank you for having me as well.
It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Not so fast. It is such a cool feeling when I see that Spotify subscribers number increase on the weekly, when I see the number of people listening to the episodes going up. And it really makes a huge difference. Have you ever done something and you feel so good when you get rewarded by some positive feedback and you really feel like you're making a difference? That's what it means to me, and that's how I feel. And it goes a long way. If you like the show, share it and subscribe it. Thank you humbly, and I'll see you next week.